Caroline from SewCanShe, and I am so excited to share with you today a quilt top that I got out of my pile to finish quilting, and I used rulers, quilting rulers, to finish this quilt. Now, I am not a professional quilter. I don't have a long arm. I quilted this quilt on my sit-down domestic sewing machine, and what I found was that the rulers really helped me improve my free motion quilting. Using rulers is still free motion quilting, but what it can do is help us bring our free motion quilting to the next level. Let me show you what I mean. So I got out this quilt top and I pressed it again, and I started thinking about what motifs and designs would look good on this quilt. Since I'm not a professional, I wasn't going to do 100 different motifs and designs all over it, a different one for each block. No, I wanted just 2 or 3 different motifs that would look great on this quilt and that I could repeat all over it. So I decided to do a simple square and square spiral shape on the middle of each of these 4 pointed stars. But that still left me the center of each block, which kind of looks like a pinwheel. That reminded me that I have this Circles on Quilts spinning wheel number 36 ruler from Westerly that is a beautiful flower motif. And I was able to use the seams in the block to help me line up the flower motif and get it perfectly centered on each of my pinwheel blocks. Can you believe that I only used 2 rulers? I used this basic ruler that came with my ruler foot, and it has a straight edge and a curved edge. In addition to that, I used the Circles on Quilts motif for the center of each block. I just repeated those 2 motifs, the Circles on Quilts flower motif and the square spiral, all over my quilt, and it has a beautiful texture and way better free motion quilting than I could have done without rulers. Another bonus was that the straight edged ruler really helped me with stitching in the ditch. So I was able to travel from motif to motif without having to break stitching. Now I know you want to see, so let me show you just how I did it. So right now I am at the edge of the block right here where I want to sew my Circles on Quilts motif. In the center of the motif will be right here. And as you can see, I have stitched in the ditch and traveled so that I am right on the edge of the block. I'm going to take a minute here and insert the thumbtack in the center of the quilt. I'm using my stiletto not necessarily to poke a hole, but just to enlarge the little hole that's in the center of my piecing here, because the thumbtack has to come up from underneath, and sometimes I feel like that is the trickiest part of this, is getting the thumbtack right in the center of the block. So there's a lot of layers there. Okay, so my thumbtack came up through the center. So I need to travel down until I'm about 1 inch away from the thumbtack, and then I can put on my Circles on Quilts ruler. So I'm going to use this ruler that has a straight edge to travel and stitch in the ditch down here. My stitch in the ditch still isn't perfect, but it's a lot better when I use a ruler foot. And of course, if you want, you can not travel at all, you can stop, and you can break your stitches and bury your threads after every motif, but I don't like that. So now I'm just going to travel till I'm closer to the little thumbtack. And I'll put the ruler on. And this is the little key that goes in the ruler so that you have a nice smooth edge all the way around. And now I'm just going to puddle my quilt all the way around. This is a pretty big quilt, and I just want to have free movement just for this little block right here where I'm working. So I'm going to take a couple more stitches until my foot is in the A position. There we go. And then I will start the Circles on Quilts design. The lines on the ruler match up with the lines on my block because this is a pinwheel block and I have 8 lines going all the way around, and so it just works perfectly with this ruler. Every time I end a little petal, I end on the B position, but when I turn the ruler, it takes me back to the A position. So then I realign the lines on the ruler with the lines on my little pinwheel, and I can go again. One thing I really like about this is I'm not twisting and turning my quilt around. My quilt edge is still here in the harp space, the same amount of quilt is here. As long as I keep enough extra puddled up around here, it's just really smooth sailing. And there I've done 8 petals. So I will just take off the little ruler, and you see the pretty little design, the pretty little motif. I'm going to take out my thumbtack. Now what I want to do next is echo stitch around this motif a 1/2 inch away, and this little ruler here, the 12-inch arc ruler, the curve of this ruler matches the curve of each of these petals. And if I line the first dashed line on the ruler up with the stitching on each petal, then my foot is going to stitch a 1/2 inch away, so that really helps me. So the next thing I need to decide is where I'm going to go next. And the next place I want to go is down here, where I'll do one of my square spiral motifs. So I'm going to stitch in the ditch to the center and then travel down this little side of the pinwheel, this little seam, until I'm 1/2 inch away. So that means that my echoing will start here, will travel around clockwise and end here, and then I'll be in a perfect position to stitch in the ditch again down to here and do my motif here. You can put the ruler on either side of your seam. This is just where I'm eyeballing a 1/4 inch away from the seam and just using the ruler to help me sew straight. That's really all I'm doing. Take a stitch to put me right in the right place so that the lines on the ruler match up with my stitching, and I will just start echoing. There are markings on the ruler that help me to know exactly where to stop for each point, but really I mostly just eyeball it, or I stop at the seam right here. Then I use the ruler to help me get in the right place for the next spoke. Again, making sure I have plenty of quilt so it doesn't pull while I'm sewing. And you notice again, I'm not turning the quilt, I'm turning my ruler and just letting the ruler help guide me where I want to go. sometimes you do need to take an extra stitch. It's still free motion quilting. It's just free motion quilting with a ruler to help you go straight. Okay, and now my echo stitching has met up with the whole, it went all the way around the design, so I will just stitch in the ditch till I get right here to this corner where I will start my spiral square. And this design, I'm going to start by going from inside corner to inside corner. I'm basically just going to do dot to dot, and if I keep my ruler here 1/4 inch away from where I want to end up, it will help me to just sew a straight line. Now I'll backtrack a little bit. My square is complete, and now I will just use the ruler and the markings on the ruler to help me do that spiral. I don't even have to always keep my marking lines on my previous stitching. That helps keep it exactly the same distance apart for each line, but if I want to just eyeball it, I can place the ruler on the other side and pretty much just eyeball where I'm going. The ruler just helps me sew straight. Alright, I finished my spiral, then I backtracked back to the seam line, and now I just have to decide where I want to go next. So here is another one of my square blocks where I'm going to sew another circles on quilts motif. So I'm just going to use my ruler to help me stitch in the ditch straight. Of course, I could have broken thread here and buried the threads later and then started down here in the center, and I would have more threads to bury, but I would rather not. Thanks so much for watching this little video about how I use quilting rulers to bring my free motion quilting to the next level on this quilt. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do, so I can continue to show you my sewing and quilting adventures. And visit my blog at SewCanShe.com, where I have a ton of free quilt patterns and sewing tutorials. Happy sewing! And there you go. Back to echoing, and then my square spiral, and then another motif, and repeat until my whole quilt is quilted.